I'm guest lecturer, adjunct faculty at U.C. Irvine. Notice I got to go to Irvine to teach about punk rock in 2006. Right? Ridiculous. All right, so it was a last-minute hire, right? They needed somebody to fill in to come teach a class on. Okay, I'm already now looking at my notes. To teach a course on writing about film and media. So, and they said I could do whatever I wanted. I had about 2 weeks, and so. Typical topics, gender, race, Hitchcock, that sort of thing, and so I chose punk. And it was like 2 weeks before courses started, so they couldn't say no. So this is from the syllabus then, right? This course is designed to help you sharpen your ability to think and write analytically about film and media. Being that the focus will be on punk rock and the cinema, we'll be examining both film and the media. We will begin by identifying what we mean by the term punk. Is there such a thing as punk film? Does punk still exist? And then considering all the contradictory histories of punk in LA, Orange County, San Francisco. Right, so you've heard the Sex Pistols how many times? It's 2006. There's only been one course ever taught on the West Coast on punk, and that was by Nicole Panter, who was the manager of the Germs. Married to something, one of those guys. And then there was a course at NYU that was taught a few years ago by Amos Poe, who did the first film ever on punk called Blank Generation in '76, right? So these are like people who were there, right? So it's like documenting like testimony. So here I come from the outside, right? So we start class, right, with the origin of the word punk. Where are my records? I'm rarely seen without records. All right, so here's the original punk, right? Iggy Pop. This is 1973. This is before punk, right? Comes out in '69, right? Lester Bangs writes an article about Iggy Pop, who shows up at the, Monterey Pop Festival in 1970, right? He's playing with heavy, like, rock people, right? And so this is what Lester Bangs said. It's one of the first usages of the word punk. That stooge punk, clawing at himself, smashing his mic and his chops, jumping into the crowd to wallow around a forest of legs and ankles and God knows what else, while screaming those sickening songs about TV eyes and feeling like dirt and not having no fun because you're a fucked up adolescent, horny but neurotic, sitting around bored and lonesome and unable to communicate with yourself or anybody else. Mark it up as one more symptom of the decline of Western civilization. This is the first thing. This is the first thing the students read in class. So, and then they got to see the part where Iggy's like smearing peanut butter on himself. Right? 25 kids. Out of them, there were 2 who'd never heard of The Clash. Wow. So a half a decade before punk even begins, you got Iggy Pop, and the phrase is coined, and the central ideas are summed up, right? Self-loathing, self-abuse, cut yourself, peanut butter. Not so different from James Dean, right? Rebel Without a Cause. You see him beating his father, James Backus, who is the voice of Mr. Magoo later. And then, of course, like beating himself, right? Okay, number 2, the idiot, right? This is what Lester Bangs calls Iggy, right? Calling it one of his genius's central facets. So purity, naivete, let's see, what else? Amateurism. Anyone can do it. Antagonism. Everyone should do it. So obscenity, outrageous fashion, the profane, right? Nihilism, provocation, youth movement, protest movement. But as it turns out, of course, Iggy was like 5 years ahead of the curve. Fast forward to 1975, New York City. The scene is starting to happen with television Patti Smith at CBGB's. Television Ramones, Patti Smith, Blondie. Everyone agreed that something was happening, but nobody had yet coined a phrase for it. Somebody wanted to call it New Wave, also ahead of the curve. The guy Hilly Crystal, who owned CBGB's, wanted to call it Street Rock. But finally, there was a magazine that coined the phrase called Punk Magazine. All right, so okay, this is where you get to see my absent-minded professor. I'm going to fumble with a couple of books. All right, so this is the definitive history of New York punk. Please kill me, right? I've seen it on the back of many toilets across this fine city. This is oral history by everybody in New York that ever had anything to say or anything to do with punk. Including the groupies. And they have some of the most fascinating things to say. All right, you know what? Let's just jump to the William Burroughs quote when they asked him, because they give some credit to him, because he was always talking about punks in his writing. William Burroughs says about punk, I always thought a punk was someone who took it up the ass in prison. So it's a charged term. This whole class that I'm doing starts with, there's different versions of history. There's always different versions of history. And with punk, of course, it's the question of, well, did it start in New York? Did it start in the UK? Did it start in LA, right? So, and everybody tells a different story. Some Tokyo, maybe, Detroit, Akron. So, supposedly, as myth goes, Malcolm McLaren, manager of the Sex Pistols, was in New York. He actually managed the New York Dolls for a brief time. He was the one that was responsible for dressing them in red leather and telling them to, they put up all these communist slogans. Needless to say, their career took a quick shit dive. But when he was there, he saw Richard Hell wandering around with his shirt barely like pieced together with safety pins, and so he took that back to his shop in Kings Road, London, and called Sex, which was selling patent leather S&M bondage gear to the kids. And so the first form of punk rebellion in London, in the UK, was in the form of T-shirts, right, pieced together with these pins, and also by quoting, obtuse French situationist philosophy, which we cover in depth in class.